Good evening, everybody. We'll call to order the regular council meeting of Tuesday, November 24th. As always, we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that the presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. We have a bit of a packed agenda tonight. But first, I'd like to start off with a quick proclamation. Family Violence Prevention Month of November 2020. Whereas there are many people in Alberta who experience family violence, and whereas the effects of family violence may be carried on from generation to generation, and whereas all Albertans have a role to play in preventing family violence, and whereas the City of Beaumont Family and Community Support Services works to prevent family violence through education and awareness, and whereas the Beaumont City Council calls upon the citizens of Beaumont to reach out, speak out against family violence, and to make a difference by creating a culture of support for those affected by family violence. And whereas the Beaumont City Council calls upon all Albertans to help make our province violence-free in 2020 and beyond, therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor John Stewart, do hereby proclaim November 2020 as Family Violence Prevention Month, dated this 19th day of October 2020. I really do appreciate that. Next on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? CAO? Schling? No? Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Hendricks, thank you.
Hello, Your Worship.
Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please use your voting buttons.
Are you not considering amending that, Mayor Stewart? The one item? 9A?
Oh, crap. Yeah, sorry. let's
It's all right, I
back
just
up.
remembered.
Yeah, no, I got on a roll, missed my note. Can I get you to withdraw your motion, Councillor Hendricks? I'll get you to remake it in a second.
Withdrawn.
Thank you. I'd like to make a quick amendment to the agenda, item 8D. Sorry, 8B, sorry. We have an attachment. Sorry, what's the amendment?
Sorry, I was referring to 9A. You talked about possibly moving that to consent.
Oh yeah, we'll do that with the consent agenda. We're still on adoption of the agenda.
Oh, you were going to add it then. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll stay out of it.
Okay. Thought I was getting caught because 8D is an in-camera item that I was just going to move down to number 14 at the same spot where we do closed sessions instead of doing it at 8D. Or sorry, 8B, part D. All right, can I get re-get the motion to do the agenda as presented? And we will be doing 8B attachment 4 at section 14 and not during the meeting. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor, please use your buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nice. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda. We have a number of items, so I would move that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Item 5A, special council meeting minutes of November 9th, 2020. Item 5B, regular council meeting minutes of November 10, 2020. Item 5C, committee of the whole meeting, November 17th, 2020. Item 8D, tax recovery process, change of public auction date. And item 9A, bylaw 991-20, land use bylaw, election sign regulations, first reading. Discussion on the motion.
No.
Councillor Daniluk.
No, I shook my head no. Sorry.
Oh, your hand's up on the chat bar, so.
Oh, sorry. It was out from before. I apologize.
Okay, seeing no further discussion on the motion, Councillor Stout.
I'm sorry, could you just clarify, you want to put first reading into the consent agenda? Could you just explain to me why we don't get to vote on that or discuss that, please?
because it's bylaw 9, it's election sign change. It's election sign regulation changes that we discussed at length in previous meetings. And its first reading, just to introduce it, it needs to come back to public hearing and second and third reading. So I was just trying to move the process along to an agenda item that we've already spoken about.
Okay.
If you'd like, we can remove it and discuss on it, but
I prefer to go through the formality of first reading, even though I imagine it will just be a formality.
no, fair enough. I will withdraw item 9A from the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
No.
Seeing none? All in favor? Please use your buttons. Okay, it's not your raised hand, it's your yes, no. Yes is in favor. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Consent agenda follows, which brings us to item 4, the open forum. I understand we have one presenter.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Yes, we do have one presenter. I'll just let him in here. Chris, can you hear us okay?
He's muted.
You're on mute.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Schaefer. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. Appreciate you taking the time out to address us. Just a reminder, you get 5 minutes and we will be running a timer just to give you that heads up when you get close to the end of your time.
Okay, sounds
But
good.
anyway, the floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity, councillors. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about respirators. I know we just watched the Premier's address. I don't know if you guys had a chance to catch that with Dr. Hinshaw and such, talking about masks and how effective. And I find it very ironic and actually quite amusing that our provincial health minister, Dr. Hinshaw, who should know better, is wearing a non-medical mask for protection from a deadly virus. Non-medical mask is not a respirator, and it can't protect anybody from viruses at all, like zero protection. And it's not only totally ineffective for any type of viral protection, but it's also potentially very hazardous as well, just to people's health. So what an actual respirator would look like that's designed is something like this. So you can see this, it's kind of the same size, but it's an engineered device specifically designed for breathing because it has ports for inhalation with filters on it. So the air is easily to pull through inhalation into the mask and into the lungs quite effortlessly. And it's expelled, the carbon dioxide is efficiently expelled with every exhalation through the center exhalation valve right here. So in order for a respirator to do its job, number one, the first consideration for any respirator is it breathable? Because if it's not easily breathable, it can cause immediate health complications to people that aren't able to breathe very strongly. So people with asthma, allergies, lung disease, heart disease, pacemakers, autism, you name it. The list goes on and on and on. Anybody with pre-existing medical conditions before this COVID thing happened, anybody with pre-existing medical conditions, no matter what they were, whether they're physical, whether they're mental, whatever it may be, would have to be evaluated by a healthcare professional like a physician to determine, are they physically fit? Are they mentally capable of wearing one of these devices, with the increased demands on their inhalation and exhalation that something like this is going to cause that person. So somebody with health conditions is not likely to ever even be permitted to wear this. And this is designed for breathing. This is designed for breathing. Okay. Now, if you look at a non-medical mask, this is an N95. I don't have a non-medical mask with me, but a non-medical mask is like this with cloth. So this is an N95. So this is a basic respirator. This does not have valves for inhalation and exhalation. So it's forcing you to rebreathe your exhaled air. And this type of respirator here was only designed for a very short duration, light duty work effort, because it gets wet immediately. It gets wet. It starts to breed bacteria and fungus in the material of the mask. And then it's to be immediately discarded and only used once. And that's the purpose of this type of mask. And then when you get the non-medical mask isn't a respirator at all. So this is a respirator, a very basic one. This is a better respirator. Neither one of these is going to stop a virus. Neither one of these could help you with a virus, because viruses are infinitely smaller than any of our respirators are capable of filtering. And a non-medical mask is really just the device for a slow self-suffocation, because there's no good airflow. It forces users to rebreathe their exhaled air, and over a longer period of time, it can cause life-threatening complications. It can cause death. In other words, a non-medical masks are not designed for breathing. They can cause death, especially for people that have difficulty breathing without a mask on. Now, even people that can breathe well without a mask on, they're going to be rebreathing their exhaled air over and over again. And there's a reason that actually respirators, real respirators, do have valves for inhalation and valves for exhalation, because rebreathing your exhaled air on an ongoing basis is very poisonous to the body and very toxic. So even a healthy person can get sick from a respirator if it's not engineered for breathing. So here's a respirator, and a non-medical mask really just captures your air, traps your exhaled air, traps your moisture, traps your heat, can breed bacteria and fungus. And the problem with it, the biggest problem I have with all of this is, despite the ridiculousness of recommending non-medical masks and the dangers of it, is that our health minister and our leaders are betraying us to a certain extent, because they are not letting us know, they're not telling people the dangers of non-medical masks.
Here's your 5-minute warning. So yeah,
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Is that it?
Continue. Well, we'll give you a couple minutes to wrap up. But
Okay, sounds good. So it's just that non-medical masks not being respirators, they're very dangerous. And if you mandate these, as Alberta has done overall, and I guess it's pretty much mandated anyhow in Beaumont, probably being in Alberta, but to understand the dangers of enforcing that, is that it's going to cause people to get much sicker, and it's going to cause people medical emergencies and health crises that they wouldn't have without these non-medical masks or barriers on their faces. And that's really what I wanted to tell you. So it's really a travesty that these types of masks are being mandated as a protection from a virus. It's just absolutely insane. And I have no idea how this is even going. And when we look at the health minister talking about new cases, like 1,100 new cases, 348 in hospital, 66 in ICU, that's not a crisis. That's not a pandemic. We have over 100 hospitals in Alberta. That's a very low capacity demand. But they're talking about hospitals being over demanded. They're not. If it was only one hospital in the province, yeah, that would be a significant load. But having 100 hospitals in the province, it's nothing. It doesn't even reach the scale of epidemic scale at that rate. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today.
well, we appreciate you coming in and sharing your viewpoint. And like you say, you're always welcome to come to council and express your viewpoint. So is there a member of council wishing to ask questions, or?
Yeah, does anybody have a question for me?
Okay. Seeing none, I guess we'll take it under advisement as we go forward, because as you heard today, the province has taken over the mandate for masks. So it's not really in our hands anymore. So we'll go from there, and as we move forward through the pandemic, we appreciate the information and we'll take it under advisement.
Okay, I appreciate it, councilors. Thanks so much.
What happened to my? There we go. All right, so we're up and running, which brings us to item 6, public hearings. We have none. Which brings us to item 7, register presentation. Up first is we have 3 tonight. Up first is the Beaumont Library capital request presentation. Ms. Laura Winton.
Thank you, Worship. I will let in Miss Winton right now.
Good evening, Laura. How are you tonight?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for seeing me again so soon. Let me
appreciate
just.
you being able. As I can say, we appreciate you being able to join us. Looking forward to the presentation. Just a quick reminder, we got 10 minutes, and so we will be running a timer.
Okay.
Just to let you know when we've hit our end, and we'll go from there. Please, the
Okay.
floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Okay, I just have to once again figure out how to share my screen, which I am not good at. Okay, does anybody have any ins? Oh, there it is, share screen, got it. Okay. Share and okay. So thank you guys so much for seeing me again so soon. As I said, I'm excited to have the opportunity to present the library's capital funding requests for 2021. I can't wait to share with you some potential projects and our vision for an expanded library space. So before I dive into the requests, I wanted to come back to what grounds all the work we do, our vision and our values. The library is at its core about connection. We connect people to information, knowledge, community, resources, space, technology, ideas, and learning. And as we strive to realize this vision, we're guided by our values, and those are lifelong learning, innovation and creativity, collaboration and partnership, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the projects I'm presenting today will increase our opportunities to connect with our community, and they will enhance our ability to connect Beaumontonians to each other, to ideas, to technology, to space, and to learning. These projects were born out of and will be guided by our commitment to providing innovative, creative, collaborative services that encourage lifelong learning and increase equity, diversity, and inclusion in Beaumont. So with our vision and values in mind, I'm excited to present 3 capital funding requests for 2021. The first is a library bike. The second is a library expansion. And in case a full library expansion is a bit too much for 2021, I will present a request for the design work to get us started on our journey towards the full library expansion. I want to note at the outset that each project aligns with both the library's plan of service and the city's strategic goals. Most specifically, these projects contribute to the city's goal to enhance the livability of Beaumont by ensuring that recreation and cultural facility infrastructure is available to all citizens. So I'll dive right into these. The first request for funding is for a library bike. This would be an exciting new service that will allow us to get out in the community to offer more programming than our current program space allows, to meet Beaumontonians where they live and play, and to ensure folks who might not be able to come to the library have an opportunity to use our services nonetheless. What it actually is an electric cargo bike. It would be equipped with a small borrowing collection for material lending on the go and programming supplies so we can offer pop-up library programs in the community. The pictures on the slide are of the specific bike we are looking at purchasing, and it's called an Urban Arrow. On the left, you see employees of the High River Public Library with the Urban Arrow bike they recently purchased, and they'll be rolling this out in the spring. One of the great advantages of a library bike is flexibility. It can really go anywhere. The library will develop a regular schedule for pop-up borrowing and programming informed by community consultation and public input. We anticipate traveling to parks, care homes, community organizations, schools, daycares, and really wherever we're needed. We would hope to operate the bike approximately 6 months a year during our warmer seasons. So why do we need a library bike? In a nutshell, demand for library programs is outpacing supply. Our programs are full with wait lists, and we don't have the space in our building to offer more programs. So a library bike would allow us to move some programming into the community and increase the supply immediately without needing more space in our building. Otherwise, COVID-19 further limits our ability to host in-person programs, but outdoor programs are both more safe and were very popular when we piloted them on the hill outside the library in the summer. And finally, as noted before, a library bike lets us meet people where they are, reaching folks who might not be able to come to the physical library or just don't know who we are and what we offer. The costs are included in your package, but here again is the detailed breakdown. The bike itself costs about $10,000, but we would need to do some customization to allow it to house and easily display a collection and programming materials, which drives the bike cost up a little bit. We will also need to equip the bike with programming supplies, a speaker and headset, a mobile material lending collection, and an iPad with circulation capabilities so people can borrow directly from the bike. So the total anticipated cost to launch the library bike is $25,000. Unfortunately, as with all new services, that's not where the costs end. There are some ongoing operational costs attached to this project. For the library bike, operational costs will be primarily staffing costs. There are some maintenance costs, but they're minimal. I anticipate offering bike service 6 months a year and initially staffing it for 20 hours a week, which is an FTE of 0.3. So based on our salary grids, the approximate operational cost would be $10,000 in the first year, and that will increase as staff salaries increase. Also, depending on demand, we could see the need for more hours in the future, which would also increase operational costs. Before I move to the next request, I just wanted to return to the benefits of the project now that we've gotten rid of all the icky cost details. And the benefits really are significant. We'll be able to engage with more community members and increase awareness of library services. We'll have the opportunity to reach underserved community members who may not be able to come to the physical library, and we'll be able to offer more programming than we are currently able to offer in our limited physical space. And speaking of limited physical space, our second capital funding request is for a much needed library expansion. Before I dive into the two requests related to the library expansion, I want to acknowledge the history and the previous work done by the library and considered by council in relation to a library expansion. In 2017, the library conducted a feasibility study to determine the best options for library expansion, including where and how the expansion should take place, and to outline potential costs for that expansion. The study used a design population of 49,560, the projected population of Beaumont in 2050. And based on that projected population, it proposed a 27,000 square foot expansion of the current library at a cost of approximately $18 million. We learned some very important things from that study. First, that expanding the library in the current location is the best option for meeting the library and the community's needs. Second, that this expansion in the current location will be the most cost-effective option. And finally, that the current location has the land necessary to allow us to expand by at least 27,000 square feet before we would need to move locations entirely or add a second location. Unfortunately, $18 million is a lot of money, and it is a lot of money and a lot of space to invest right now, given that we are not likely to need quite that much space for another 30 years. And with that all said, I want to talk a bit about the current expansion and the current needs. We do currently badly need an expansion. The library does not currently meet Government of Alberta standards at essential levels for staffing, collections, or space. We are currently about half the size we should be to serve our population. Our collection is 15,000 items short of essential standards, and we can't increase that size without more space. Finally, we're short one full-time librarian position. We only have 3 full-time staff, and we make up a large percentage of our current FTE with casual staff, and that makes it difficult to execute project work, and it limits the possibility of delegating major operational tasks. Again, expanding that staffing is difficult because we don't currently have adequate staff workspace. So meeting target numbers is not really the fundamental or I think a sufficient reason to expand the library. The best reason to invest in any space or service is because it will add value to our community, meet our community needs, and enhance the livability of our city. The library's vision for an expanded space will do all those things. First, we will use added space to expand the small makerspace we are launching in 2021. This will be a space for creativity and innovation. Through consultation with the public and community organizations, we will design a custom Beaumont makerspace tailored to the needs and interests of our city. The makerspace will provide barrier-free access to creative technologies and equipment. It will be a place where everyone and anyone can come to explore and discover. The possibilities really are endless, from 3D printing to fabrication equipment like sewing machines to creative design software to unconventional lending collections like knitting needles or tools, and on and on. Our makerspace will be a destination for Beaumontonians. Second, we will expand and enhance our children's space. We want to offer all families a barrier-free place to come and hang out, explore, play, learn, and of course, read. But we want our children's library to be more than stacks of books. An expanded children's library will offer space for manipulatives, creative play areas, custom furniture that offers kids nooks and crannies to cuddle up with a book or a puzzle, and comfortable seating for parents and caregivers. We know literacy is bigger than just books. Our expanded library children's space will offer kids provocations and invitations to explore multiple literacies and to have a whole lot of fun while doing so. So what do we want? What am I actually asking for? The library is requesting funding of $3.35 million to expand the library by 7,500 square feet, taking us from our current 8,500 square feet to 16,000 square feet. With this addition, we would meet GOA standards for space for essential level service for the current Beaumont population size. We would have the space to expand staffing and collections to meet those GOA standards. And most importantly, we would use that space and additional staff to realize our vision of a vibrant children's space and an innovative maker space. So those costs, the estimates are based on the 2019 Altus Group Canadian Cost Guide, which places, I hear my buzzer, I'm almost there, which places the cost per square foot for construction of a new library in Edmonton at $315 to $415 per square foot. These numbers assume a new build. We based our request on a cost of $400 per square foot. We expect costs to sit a little bit high given our project is an expansion and not a new build. The expansion will likely require the movement of utilities, and we anticipate adding specialized space for maker equipment at a higher cost. The library expansion will increase rental costs and utility costs, but likely the most significant cost increase will come from the need to add additional staff to staff the space. We would plan to add additional library assistant hours to our current staffing complement and a second full-time non-management librarian. Additional staffing needs will be explored further in the library's 2021 organizational review, and you'll hear more about that at the operational budget presentation later this week. Ultimately, I have estimated an increase in operational budget of $120,000 in the first year in the expanded space. So that's my pitch for a full library expansion, but I also wanted to present council with an alternative that will still bring us closer to our goal of an expanded library space, but that doesn't require as significant a capital investment in 2021. You also have in your package a request for capital funding of $150,000 to complete the design phase of a planned 7,500 square foot expansion. The vision and a goal for the design work would be the same as for the full expansion, a vibrant new children's area and a makerspace. In this design phase, we would acquire shovel-ready plans at 3 predetermined price points to give the library and council options to consider. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you everyone for your time today. As always, the staff, the board, and I are so grateful for your continued support. And this is actually a picture of 6 of us right here today in the library saying thank you. So I'm eager to answer any questions you might have about the proposals.
No, we do appreciate you coming in and showing us the proposals. We have read the package, so it looks like an exciting project and an exciting time. So we'll see what shakes out at budget over the next at the end of the week here.
Perfect.
But I will finally open it up to members of council for questions for Laura. Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Ms. Winton. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity. Process first, if I could ask, Mayor, because it's so close to budget workshop time and this is a budget related item, And I do want to ask my questions of Ms. Winton. Should I ask those questions now, or could we possibly invite her back to the budget workshop?
No, ask question. You can ask your questions now. I think that's fine. And then we'll take the asks to the budget workshop. We're not going to make any financial decisions tonight. But if you have questions on the proposals, I think tonight's your time to, she's here, we're here. It's time to, yeah, just go ahead and ask questions.
Then let me dive into at least two of them that I wanted to ask. I maybe should know this, but I'm just wondering, Ms. Winton, do you happen to know what your final numbers are, or what they're projected to be? Because we're not at the end of the year yet. Do you anticipate a surplus at the end of 2020?
We anticipate at this point in time a small surplus at the end of 2020.
What do you mean by small?
By small, we mean under $10,000.
Under 10, that's pretty small.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but I was on the library board, and I'm aware of the $30,000 surplus that's been carried over and over and over. And I'm sure Councilor Hendricks can also give us the history on this one. And I'm just wondering why that isn't your request for the bike. Why can't you just come to council and say, I want to use that, and it's council's decision, yes or no?
So a couple things. We've worked hard in our 2021 budget to bring you guys a 0% increase for 2021 in our operational budget. What that requires of us is that we start digging into that 30,000 operational reserve that we have. To cover some additional costs that we're going to have in 2021. So we do anticipate digging into that surplus in 2021. So that's what I'm thinking there. Could we use more of it for the library bike should council not decide to fund this project? We will have some money left over in that in 2021, and we could use that. There are a few other options for funding for the library bike, and we do hope to push forward with this even if council doesn't grant the funding.
So just to be clear, Ms. Winton, the $30,000 from 2020, even counting that, you only have $10,000 surplus anticipated?
Sorry. So we basically, we have used some of that surplus in 2020 to cover the small new quiet study room that we made. So anticipating that we need to pay that money back into the surplus to top it back up to 30,000, we will have under 10,000 left at the end of 2020. So the surplus will be back up to its 30,000 moving into 2021. And we anticipate using some of that operational reserve in 2021 to fund things I will be talking about in our operational budget for 2021.
Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Daniluk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Ms. Whitten. Thank you for your presentation. Always very informative. Just a bit of a general question. So on the idea of expansion, are you perhaps looking at expanding towards City Hall or towards the Toboggan Hill on the north side of the building? Or is there room towards the west, which I'm assuming there's not a lot, but there might be? Any thoughts on what you were thinking of in terms of maybe expanding in two directions, not just one, to achieve that square footage? Just an idea what you're maybe thinking, perhaps? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that there's about 5,000 square feet between us and the city building, the city administration building. So there is space there, but we do have space heading towards the Toboggan Hill and then down towards the road. We would hate to completely take over the Toboggan Hill right away because we know how popular that is. But we are looking at options, I think, to fill in some of the space between our program room. If you're familiar with the building, it kind of is a bit of a V. So we could push out this way. We could also fill in a little bit between the program space and the main library. That's where our utilities currently sit. So that's where moving those utilities would become necessary.
Good. Thank you for now. Appreciate that.
Councilor Stout?
Thank you, Your Worship. Have we lost Laura?
No, I think I'm still here.
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry, the screen's popping up and then my apologies. Thanks for the presentation, Laura. That's great. I of course, seen most of this before at the library board. I was wondering, could you give us an I'm particularly interested in the library bike. One of the features that appeals to me most is what you referred to as getting library services to people who may not be able to access the library for whatever reason. Could you give us an example of the sort of programs that you'd be running in the library bike? This is more than just lending and borrowing books, I assume.
Yeah, it is. So we would be looking at likely running a suite of programs. One of the advantages of the library bike as well is that it would be sort of a flexible programming module for us. So we have our set programs that we run in our space, but the library bike would be our outreach programming module, and it would be quite adaptable. So I anticipate that we would run some regular children's programming over the summer in the park and things like that. But we would also be able to do custom outreach programming to, for example, care homes, residences, seniors residences. We can adapt programming quite easily, throw stuff in the bike and head out. There would also potentially be the capability to bring along a mobile laptop lab and actually be able to bring technology to people to use that in programming as well. So there really are a lot of options out there. For children's, I would anticipate we'll be doing story times, rhyme times, songs, those sorts of things. Seniors outreach, we would be looking at hosting book clubs, doing travel sessions, doing technology, and really reaching out to the community to see what they want and what they need, and then adapting that.
Okay, thank you. A lot of options there, and I'd really like to see that happen. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the presentation.
Councillor Mungo-Swain.
Yeah, thank you. And first off, apologies. I left the meeting. Well, I didn't try to leave the meeting, but I left and I struggled to get back. So I missed a little bit of it. I read the pre-material, so hopefully you haven't covered these questions. If I have, just apologies in advance. So first up, regarding the bike itself, and maybe this is more directed to administration from a financial perspective, do we consider that a capital cost? And with that, is that something that's could potentially be covered by one of the grant funding streams?
I would open up that to admin, but in the past we've been able to cover that way. Mr. Dollar.
Yeah, real quickly, Councillor, you're absolutely right. It would be capital from an accounting perspective, and we could use grants to fund it.
Thank you. And I assume the process here, Your Worship, is we're not going to get into, I won't tip my hat on whether I'm up or down on this. We'll get into discussions as part of budget, and we'll deal with it then. Okay, perfect.
Clarifying questions on the project.
Great. The second question, just regarding the expansion and the studies behind it. Ms. Winton, we've talked a little bit about this offline. The need to, we've got the pressures coming from the arts side of things, as well as the library, and I kind of group it under culture. Have you in your own mind, have you been thinking about and partnered with thinking about, coming back with that kind of that joint proposal? And again, sorry if you covered this earlier.
No, yes. So we've I've been working and speaking regularly with the BSA, the Arts Association, and the new Arts Council that I'm actually going to be a member of. Very exciting. We haven't yet. Stephen, yes, it's great. I have been thinking about that, and we have been talking about that, and I've also been speaking with the city about their plans for that. Where we're at with things is things are in a bit of a holding pattern there. Our thoughts as a library are, let's get some plans in place and let's do some building for a library expansion with the intention that it can be added to and we could expand it. The thought with the theater space is that if we were going to do that on the current location, it would likely spill over into the hill, and that would be where the theater would go. So when we go out for design on this, we would make sure that we bring in representatives from the BSA, that we bring in Paul, and we look at how we could build this smaller expansion of the library so that if we decided to go the way of a major cultural center and expanding further, that could be something that could be added on.
Great, good answer. Thank you. That's all the questions I had tonight, Your Worship.
Councillor Van Newkirk. And then we'll probably wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you. Going down the collaboration route again too, thinking of, when we can have events again. I do see the bike as being, part of, weekend and evening and afternoon events. And maybe you could just speak to some of the collaboration efforts that might be available to you there as well, because I think the lending aspect of it is one thing, but there's also, a PR aspect, and there is a awareness aspect, and drumming up more walk-in and digital business and did you knows, and maybe you could speak to that a little bit too.
Yes, absolutely. I really tried to play up the library service and programming aspect of it in this presentation, but I'm also very aware that one of the amazing features of a library bike is that it's basically a promotion mobile. We will get it branded. People will see this riding around town. We would plan to staff it in during evening hours and on the weekend so that we can be at major festivals that are happening, and smaller festivals. We'll be at the farmers market with our bike and a table, lending material, getting the word out with some promotional materials, and hopefully signing new people up for library cards. That's a capability that we'll also have with it. So looking at working again closely with the BSA, with the arts community, collaborations with FCSS as well. If they're having events, we can come on over on the bike and have material available and raise awareness.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks for expanding on that. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, thank you. And certainly the issue with the library and the expansion of that, and along with the arts programming that also needs to be addressed. And we've got conversations regarding the CCBCC. We've got other conversations regarding other facilities. Really looking forward to budget so that we can have all of this brought in and have a really good, hard, solid, hopefully some direction following decisions, as to where all this goes. So we can see that as a growing community. We have the unfortunate luxury, I guess, of the expansion. We have to. A lot of communities would envy the situation we're in, but part of growth is expansion. So let's all bring this to the budget process. Love to have a good, hard conversation about the Altus report and some of the other numbers that are being presented here today, and then try to make this work for all of us. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Whitman, for coming in and spending some time with us and proposing these projects. And yeah, we look forward to a robust discussion come Friday, Saturday, and we'll see how that goes. And appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Which brings us to our next presenter. We have the Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival, Mr. Jeremy Cornell.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just add him to the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Cornell. Please, you could join us for council tonight, present on the Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival. Just a quick reminder, we're going to have a timer running for the 10 minutes presentation time. So we have seen the pre-material that you sent in advance, and so we're looking forward to it. So floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep. That's it.
Good. Well, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure, as always, to be here. By my calculations, this is my 10th year presenting an annual report for the BBRF to council, and this is the first year where pants have been optional, so it's a very different situation. I'm just going to share my screen here and bring up the presentation that I have submitted. All right, I think you should be able to see that now.
We got you.
So this is the 2020 Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival year in review, highlights from our year and our plans for the future. It's been a very challenging year and probably the most work we've ever had to put into the BBRF due to all of the COVID and other related situation. So just to give you a quick synopsis here, planning for this year's festival started basically in July of 2019. Right after the 2019 festival, we began looking at our lineup for 2020 and going after some of the biggest acts that we've ever gone after to headline our festival. Offers were made on all 21 acts, including our 4 headline performers, and contracts were drawn up and sent out prior to March as per our usual timeline. Our lineup announcement was scheduled to take place at our annual St. Patrick's Day event on Friday, the 13th of March, and which was unfortunately canceled at the last minute because that was when everything kind of went downhill. Kicking off the festival season and following the success of 2019, we really expected a huge sellout. Our pre-sales, which we saw between November and January, were at a record high levels, close to 400 weekend passes in our super early bird sellout. And that's people who don't even know who's playing and they buy tickets anyway. And we had pre-sold pretty much all of our cabanas, which is our little tents that we sell for groups of 10 or 12 people. Yeah, so this would have definitely been a whole new level of recognition for our festival and for the city of Beaumont with the acts that we had booked, which I am legally not able to share with you at this time. As of March 13th at noon, the CCBCC closed and our event was canceled. By late March, some of our major sponsors had begun to pull out, and those who had already funded us were requesting refunds of their sponsorship funding. So we obliged and repaid that money. By April, 2 of our other major fundraising events had been canceled. We do one with a couple different societies in town here. So those events also had to be canceled, which were major fundraisers for us in the previous years. Early in April, we began discussions with our talent agencies in regards to the possibility of postponing or canceling the 2020 festival, as what initially started as a 2-week lockdown began to grow and expand, as we all know. Contractually, for those 4 headline acts, we were locked into approximately $185,000 in contract obligations. And by the end of April, we were forced to retain an entertainment lawyer to help with managing negotiations and these contract obligations that we had in place for 2020. Entertainment contracts are written in such a way that the entertainers get their money no matter what, and so getting out of them is a tricky bit of business. In May, we settled in theory with the agency for the 4 headline acts based on the commitment that we would extend the offers to 2021. So we extended those offers for those 4 acts to 2021, and those were accepted throughout the summer, the final ones being accepted in September. However, there's an ongoing disagreement regarding contract language that was intended to protect our volunteer nonprofit event. And as of October, legal discussions are continuing in regards to the 2020-2021 contracts. At this point, it's kind of at a bit of a stalemate where we're kind of in a wait and see situation where nobody's really taking action against us or the other way, and the money is kind of in limbo, but it is what it is. And I expect by January, there'll be further discussions once we have a better idea of what 2021 will look like. We adapted to the pandemic as we went through the year. We monitored COVID-19 restrictions, and when in July it was advised that outdoor seated concerts could take place, we considered how we could meet these AHS requirements and meet the mandates of our society and still proceed with some sort of an event. So that is when we began planning for the 2020 mini BBRF. We called it the Badass event because it was held at the Beaumont District Agricultural Society Fairgrounds. We spent a great deal of hours developing a 30-page protocol and to meet all AHS regulations. We got that approved from Alberta Health Services, meeting all the guidelines and going above and beyond what the provincial requirements were, including we mandated masks, even though it was an outdoor event, and other things that went above and beyond the bare minimums just to ensure the safety of all the guests at our event. On the September long weekend, we presented this small scale event to 200 guests. And doing this really helped us to gain the knowledge and experience that will aid us in the presentation of future events. Because as we are aware that we don't expect things to return to the way they were anytime soon. And even when they do return, there's going to be new precautions and protocols in place that we will need to follow. And so I think it was a very good learning experience. I went off without a hitch, and there was no significant, there was nothing that came out of our event as far as cases or transmission of COVID. So yeah, I'm going to say that here. We're pleased to report that the Badass ran smoothly. There were 0 COVID cases or transmission. All of our guests were very respectful of the rules and regulations, and I think they were just grateful that we were able to do some sort of an event and have some sort of live music in a summer that was devoid of such things. It was appreciated by all the attendees and the performers, many of whom hadn't worked since prior to March and depend on performing as a big part of their income. So we were able to put a little bit of money in the pockets of some performers and artists, which was really good for them, and it meets our mandate to support the arts. There was significant media attention around this event, including a number of appearances on the local news, Global and CTV broadcasted live from the event, did interviews, and we even had the Global One helicopter broadcasting live on the news while we were right over top of the event. So that was kind of cool. And it was, some good positive attention for the city of Beaumont. A brief look at our financials in very high level summary here. So basically revenue that we lost in 2020 amounts to approximately $47,000. That's our 3 fundraising events that generally net us between $4,000 and $6,000 each in profit. The withdrawn sponsorships and monies that we had to repay was approximately $15,000. And then ticket sales for pre-sales that we had to refund was approximately $17,000. So that's the $47,000 in revenue that we lost out on. That doesn't account for all of the revenue we would have had from all of the ticket sales had we proceeded with the event, which we did not. Summary of expenses. Despite the fact that we did not have a major festival, that does not mean the bills stopped coming in. There was still a number of expenses, some of them unexpected and some of them new for this year. Service fees that we had to pay for refunding tickets was about $1,600. Our insurance, which is typically around just under $9,000 a year, we did manage to negotiate with the insurance company for a discount due to the fact that we were not putting on any major events, but it was still a cost of $3,500 for our annual insurance. Legal fees, as of the end of October, when I submitted this presentation, was about $7,500. And as I mentioned, that is still an ongoing matter, in which there could be potentially additional costs there. And then additional costs for our mini BBRF event. Not to dwell on it too much, but we did have initially, before we announced that event and started selling tickets, we had a written support from the administration, from the city of Beaumont, to support the event through the use of the town's own stage and some other supports. Unfortunately, prior to the event, that support was withdrawn, and that $3,500 represents the cost of us having to rent the same type of stage from a private supplier for this event. So we're looking at about $16,000 in expenses so far for 2020, just roughly. So the point of this is to say that just because there was no festival does not mean we did not have bills to pay, because we did. Looking forward to 2020 and beyond, I'll try to be quick because I know my time is running out. 2021 is still very uncertain for the entertainment industry as a whole. But what we've seen is that we need to adapt in order to move forward and not expect things to return to the way they were previously. We are proactively preparing for a year that we anticipate will look similar to 2020. Rather than planning for a large major event in June like we typically would, we're currently looking at options for presenting one or multiple small scale events similar to what we did out at the Badass in September throughout the summer, so that we can still bring a little bit of arts and culture to the people of Beaumont. Of course, this all depends on where we're at with the COVID and the Alberta health and what the rules are. And that's assuming we return to a state where we're allowed to have a couple hundred people at an outdoor event again, as we were this past summer. That all remains to be seen. But at this point, we're kind of moving forward with some rough plans in that direction. Small scale events in compliance with the guidelines, I think, is what's going to be our future for 2021. So that's the end of my slides. I guess at the heart of why we're here tonight is to give you kind of a rundown of where we're at and to let you know, just because we haven't had a major festival, we have not been sitting idle. In fact, it is probably the hardest our team has worked in the entire history of the festival, dealing with these contracts and these legal matters and all of these issues that we've had to deal with. And as I mentioned, just because we didn't have a festival doesn't mean we didn't have some expenses, and we've had a huge reduction in our revenue due to not having our fundraisers and not having any tickets to sell for events. And so at this point in time, we're coming before council to ask, as you're aware, we received a letter in October from administration stating that there would be no funding for 2021 based on the fact that we did not have a festival in 2020. So that's in regards to the $50,000 annual funding that we have been receiving up to 2020. And what we are asking for is for council to consider a smaller funding of approximately $20,000 for 2021, which will cover the expenses we've had to stay afloat in 2020 and will put us back up on par for having $50,000 in the bank to start 2021, so that we can consider some of these small scale community-based events for the people of Beaumont in 2021, depending what happens. So that is the summary of why we're here. So yeah, and I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for coming in tonight. And it's nice to see that if you're not thriving, at least you're surviving. And it was nice to see that event happen. And you have a plan going forward to 2021. I will open it up to members of council for questions. Okay, I see none. So we'll take your budget ask under consideration as we move into Thursday, Friday, Saturday here. And we will go forward from there. Appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Which brings us to our next presenter, the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have 4 members of the Beaumont Chamber attending this evening, and I'm just going to start to let them in here.
Good evening and welcome to the chamber. I'll introduce yourself as we go. Glad you could come in and present tonight. Just a quick reminder that we will be running a timer for the 10 minutes that's allocated towards the presentation, and then we'll go for questions after that. So Catherine, it's as the president, I will defer to you. The floor is yours. Good evening and welcome to the chamber. And I'll introduce yourself as we go. Glad you could come in and present tonight. Just a quick reminder that we will be running a timer for 10 minutes that's allocated towards the presentation, and then we'll go for
Hey, Ron, can you go on mute there?
I've done it. I've done
Thanks,
it.
bud.
We're just waiting for. It looks like we're having some audio issues.
Catherine was having issues connecting, your worship.
Yeah, I can. Oh, there we go. She's connected to audio. So do we have you now?
I think I'm in. I apologize. I actually had to switch laptops. I tried on another laptop. I'm in on this laptop. Don't ask. Don't ask. It's one of those nights. So am I
No
on?
worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to go. Are we a go?
You're whenever you're ready. Floor is yours.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Well, good evening, Worship Mayor Stewart and members of council. My name is Catherine Hott, and I'm the president of the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. The Beaumont Chamber of Commerce struck a budget review committee for the purpose of reviewing the proposed budget and respective taxes for the 2021 taxation year to more fully understand the budgeting process and the subsequent effect on the Beaumont business community, with the intent of providing feedback and to make recommendations to council. So I would like to introduce Ron Hankachuk, who is our policy chair and member of the Budget Review Committee, and he's going to present our findings from the budget review. So I'll pass it over to Ron.
Please.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to present to your worship and members of council at the request of some of our members of the Beaumont Chamber. And let me share this with you folks. Okay. We were tasked with the undertaking of having a look at the budgeting process that the members of council in the city goes through. We have in the past, the chamber members have seen and noticed an increase of at least in some instances of around 10% per year for the last 3 years in their property taxes. And given today's environment, we know that that's unsustainable. So we were tasked and we brought that committee forward. Before I get started, there are some members I would like to recognize. Dale Heffern, who's our treasurer. Mike Nicolai, he's a director at large. And this young lady seems to run the whole chamber for us, Sasha Noor. Mr. Mike Dowler was one of our sources, and I would really like to thank him for the information he provided to us, as well as Troy Brittles from Accurate Assessment Group. So what we're about to present is some very brief and high-level funding or recommendations to council. We understand the process now that the city goes through, and we understand that the efforts that Mike and his staff have to go through to put together a budget. And we do appreciate that the challenges that they are faced with year after year. And the fact that council is looking at a 1.5% increase for both residential and non-residential. And the challenges that they have brought forward of saving at least 430,000, and that's until you guys get at the budget this year, which would have represented a 2% tax increase. Based on our review of the budgeting process, we have some questions and some recommendations. One of the questions we had was, we need to know if there's a strategy or not for the city of Beaumont to attract growth. And I know there is, but we don't know it. The other thing that we would like to know is if there's an economic development plan for the next 5 years, and what type of businesses is the city trying to attract. This is very key in maintaining your budgets, your residential tax rates, and that's not news to you guys. You guys all know it, but this information is not readily available to us. Beaumont is has more small businesses which are based on the home-based business than we do for the storefronts. That's a concern. We have a certain business type today that is funding the business portion of your budget. Based on the type of businesses that we can attract and increase the non-residential tax base will help council keep the tax increases to the the residential group and keep it lower. So we recommend that the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce is asking the city to focus on attracting the right kind of business, such as large businesses, if we can get them, and also to maintain, to try and maintain a small tax increase. We also see a need for the city to develop an exit strategy and a retention strategy as well. We have asked the city to provide us some statistics on the last 3 years as to the businesses that have left the city. I know some long-term businesses that have left, have closed. I know some of them are, the market just wouldn't support them. I know some are based on the COVID phenomena that's taken place currently, and some just go, we've had it and we're done. We're not going to put up with it anymore. So the Chamber recommends that the city of Beaumont develop an exit strategy for when a business closes, so that they can use this data to develop a business retention strategy. We also recommend that the data be made available to the Chamber as we are key in trying to help to support our local economy. This is the key. This is something that we didn't know at the time. Collaboration on the development of a taxation policy. When we chatted with Mike, Mr. Dowler, we were, one of the questions we had is, if last year we had a 1.6% budget increase, why did our members see a 10% increase? So there was no correlation there. It just didn't work. And when we talked to the assessment people, the assessments had only increased 5%, but that was across the board. So the assessments really carried no value in determining what the tax rate was going to be for the business community. Lo and behold, we found out, and we didn't know this. And again, it's the insight that we gained from Mr. Dollar is that 89% of the tax rate that is assessed goes to the residential portion of the city's revenue income. The other 11% is made up by the business community. So that has changed fundamentally over the last 3 years that I've been able to look at. We urged the city to develop a policy on how they're going to fund or how they're going to develop the tax split between the commercial or the non-residential versus the residential. And because it is so key to the survivability of the businesses in Beaumont, we ask that you include the chamber. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That concludes our presentation for this evening. I'd like to, I'll open it up to members of council for any questions you might have.
Well, we appreciate you coming in and presenting those 3 items. I took some copious notes. Those are long and in-depth discussions that I think we should have been having somewhat all along with our admin. I mean, that's probably where it's going to go. But yeah, we'll take those and go back and see what we can do to work on them. But I will open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Hey, Beth, thanks a lot for coming and presenting tonight. Following the route the mayor was just poking at there, I'm very glad that council's heard this information and you guys took the time to bring it. I guess one of the surprises I have is that these conversations haven't been ongoing. You know, there's monthly meetings that you guys have, and there's administration participation, I believe, in those meetings, and they're invited to go to those meetings. And I'm very happy that the dialogue is starting now. But I guess one question I would have, Ron, is what were we missing in the past? It feels like we're starting kind of fresh here to me with some of the ideas you presented. And, you know, from my view, I was under the impression that conversations like this could have been happening some time ago. Are you able to elaborate on that a bit, Ron?
Sure, I can. To Councillor Van Newkirk through your worship. The budget or the tax notices, the tax bills that the business community has realized over the last 3 years have been compounding themselves. And we've always expected some sort of an increase. But when we noticed it was year after year after year, the membership, and I'm a taxpayer on the business side as well. I asked myself, where is this going and why is it happening? And that started the conversation. We're new at this as well. It was time to find out why it's happening. We will go back to our members and let them know. So better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I'm very happy you brought it forward because they're all important questions, and you know, they deserve thoughtful answers. And I'm really happy that along the way, as you were working lately, that you found some good support in Mr. Dollar. We found the same on council. So thanks a lot, Ron. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Councillor Mungal-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the presentation. Good to get that relationship more formalized here. The one thing, just more of a point to note here, and I'm not sure, we don't have the answers yet, but a few councillors had put some questions in advance for administration regarding the budget. and a couple of them were noting, we've talked in different venues, Ron, about the graph showing the residential tax and what does it historically look like for the non-residential tax, to further your conversation, your points that you've made today. So not sure where that's going to land in terms of what information is going to be able to be brought forward, but certainly something that we are looking at, and I think that is something that we should be including in all of our budgets going forward. Is we're out here talking about 1.5% at this stage anyway, but there are many non-residential tax, and we don't really communicate that effectively. So certainly brought a lot of awareness to me on that topic, and so I appreciate you bringing it forward in this forum as well. So that's all I wanted to share tonight, but I appreciate you guys coming in.
Great. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Councillor Danlick, you're on mute, buddy.
Sorry. Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Ron and Gabriel, for coming to see us this evening. Much appreciated. I know we talked a little while ago. I mentioned in council that I was a bit surprised myself that I was of the impression in the previous couple years of our council having budgets that the increased residential percentage was also applying to business. And I know from talking to yourself a while ago of businesses around town that it's not the case at all. I don't put you on the spot, Ron, but I will for a moment, if you don't mind, being a business person in Beaumont. I know you mentioned increases in taxes. So your business, this year's 1.6 residential tax for 2020. What was your increase in taxes for your business in 2020 versus 2019? It was more than 1.6%, is my understanding.
Yes. Through your worship to Councillor Danlick. Yes, it was. The 1.6% increase was to the overall budget.
Right.
So whatever administration had set that at, there was a 1.6% increase. However, the allocation to non-residential versus residential was 11% to 89%. That's where the difference is. If you move that allocation one way or the other, that will affect the mill rate that is established for that group. And that apparently has moved over the last 3 years, as best I can figure it out. And to my business, it was 10% last year, or for this year, for 2020. In 2019, it was 10%. In 2018, it was 10%. So in the last 3 years, I have experienced a 30% increase in my taxes.
Thank you for clarifying your particular situation. It does kind of give some clarity to the situation. So I know it's on our budget discussions coming up, and we have some questions given to the administration about business tax versus residential. So I look forward to talking to you during the budget workshop. So thanks for coming, guys.
My pleasure.
Councillor Hendricks.
Hi, Your Worship. I would ask if administration could please bring us to the budget workshop. In our documents, page 4 of the 2021 proposed budget, we have the historical tax increases versus the value of typical house. If we could do the same for businesses, and then an explanation from Mr. Dollar as to what's being discussed here this evening, would be very helpful.
Yeah, just for the record. Just for the record, I think both Steve and I did ask that question as part of our written submission. So we haven't seen the answers yet, but we asked those questions last week.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. But
yes. Appreciate Councillor Samakov-Swain's comments. I also just want to clarify that I think we all had questions for our admin prior to pre-budget, so not just some. And that's one question that also I'd like to have answered. So thank you.
And we will, and just for council's information, those questions should be out tonight or tomorrow morning latest. The answers, the written submission back from the seeing no further requests to speak, once again, I'd like to thank the chamber for coming in tonight. And like I said, I took some notes and we'll refer some of it back to admin and see if we can get some of these conversations ongoing. And I took note of Councillor Hendricks' request, and we'll make sure that gets answered too.
Thank you for your time. We do appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll do item 8D and then we'll take a quick break. The Chateau de Beaumont Condo Corporation presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have Rolf here waiting, and I will just bring him into the meeting here.
Good evening, Mr. Traxel. Welcome to council for this evening. Pleased to have you here. Just a quick reminder that we have set a timer for 10 minutes for the presentation portion, and then we'll ask you some questions. If council has questions, we'll have a portion for them to ask you questions afterwards. So floor is yours whenever you're ready. And you're currently still on mute. You're still on mute. Can somebody unmute him?
How's that?
There we go. Now we got you.
Well, thank you for giving us this time to voice our concerns. My name is Rolf Traxel, and I'm a board member for Chateau de Beaumont, located just for logistical purposes, just west of 50th Street and immediately west of the Lions Campground Park, the Jerry Patsula Park. We feel that the city of Beaumont is taxing us unfairly due to a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of Bearland condo status and how it pertains to the assessment of our taxes. We consist of 16 duplex bungalows, 32 residents, that is, deeded and registered with land titles. And as we're registered as a Bearland Condo Association, the utilities, roadway infrastructure within our property are owned and serviced exclusively by the condo corporation, therefore paid by our owners through their condo fees. We look after the replacement, maintenance, roads, curbs, and asphalt. We look after our own street snow clearing, spring road sweeping, replacement, repair, and maintenance of water services, sewer, storm sewer, electrical, street lighting. We even pay a bill every month for our street lights for the power that we use. We plant our own trees, we replace our own trees, and all other related infrastructure costs are the sole responsibility of the condo property owners. The cost of servicing the flushing of fire hydrants are also our responsibility, cost of electricity, and storm sewer, flushing, all that sort of stuff is our responsibility. The board even builds up a reserve fund to service and eventually replace these utilities as sewer, power, streetlights, and hydrants begin to fail. In a sense, we're paying for these services in our condo fees to look after them ourselves, and then we are also paying for them in our yearly tax bill. Some years ago, we understand that council did adjust the mill rate for our Bearland community. I believe Councillor Hendricks was a board member at the time, and I believe he was a valued advocate for us at the time. And then when Councillor Hendricks left council shortly after, the new council rescinded the credit moving forward. And here we are again, year after year, paying for these utilities and services, basically in our condo fees to service them ourselves, in addition to paying them to the city for services that we're never going to receive. We're asking council to consider an adjustment of approximately 5%, we're thinking, which would work out to approximately $200 per unit on our individual tax returns to better reflect our fair city tax obligation as it should pertain to Bearland condo communities. The taxation of Bearland communities condominiums in the current form is not really equitable when compared to private owned homes. We are open to questions, and we're open to meet to go into detail about this. Anything that we can do to help to basically rectify this situation for us. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the letter you sent as part of your presentation beforehand. I'm not sure we have any answers for you tonight. Some of this is going to take a little bit more research and thought. But I will open it up to questions from members of council. And perhaps we can bring it back to this next budget process, depending on where we need to go. But Councillor Mungoff-Swain.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, that's just my hand up from previously. I'll make sure we take that down.
Oh, no worries. Councillor Hendricks. Still on mute.
Thank you. Perhaps we can get the documents from the 2007 council, where I believe this decision was overturned, and we can just see what the rationale was at that time. And let's please bring it to budget.
And which council was it that approved it? Do you remember?
Well, it was prior to, it was under the prior to 2007.
Okay, we'll see if we can find both.
If you look up the council where Councillor McNamara was participating, then it was approved, and then following that, I think it was 2007, that group that overturned that decision. Okay. But there's got to be some rationale to it, so please bring it. If admin could bring it to the budget retreat, then we can have a good discussion regarding that. So
we're not looking for preferential treatment. We're just looking to pay our fair share.
Great. Fair enough. Councillor Stout.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. Question really for administration. Two questions, in fact. Are there any other bare land condominiums of this type within Beaumont? Is this the only one? I don't know whether you can answer that, Mr. Traxel, or if we've got anybody on admin who can answer that.
I believe there's the condo association in Colonial Estates is a bare land condo as well.
Okay, so the same rules would then presumably apply to them.
I would assume so. And there's another development beside Bellevue School and across the street from Bellevue School.
So if we were to change your if we were to change your taxation, property tax, then we would, in fairness, have to do it with these other ones as well. Is that, are we setting a precedent, I guess, is the question.
Asking for is to consider the fair taxing of bare land condominiums.
Yes. Okay. And then I guess my question for admin is are there do other nearby municipalities treat bare land condominiums as a separate category of property? Do we know, or can we find out? Again, I suspect I'm opening a big can of worms here, so I don't necessarily expect an immediate answer.
Yeah, I'll take a note of that one, and we'll put it into that package to bring it back to budget, because we're getting into what's turning into a robust budget discussion. So
yes, agreed.
Not that I want to stifle the discussion, but I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of budget items which are scheduled for, in this case, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So, but yeah, I'll make a note of that one too.
Thank you.
Seeing hands still up. I know Bill has talked and Perry's talked. Are we going around again?
One more.
Perry?
I haven't talked yet.
Okay, Perry.
If I can, just to tidy up the colonial discussion. So yes, that's actually where we set a separate mill rate. It was with that group at that time. And there's tremendous documentation with respect to what the other communities are doing, how it came about, and why the mill rate was set where it was set. So I don't think there's a lot of research that has to be done on this one. I think it's there. We just got to bring it forward. I think it's an easy task just to find out where it was and then why it got overturned. I think, and then from that this group can have another look at it and see if it makes sense. So.
Hey, sorry, Councillor Daniluk, it's been confusing watching the side here. So.
No,
I'm
that's
just
okay,
going to ask
John.
members of council, when you're done, just please drop your hands. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I appreciate the hand thing. It's a little hard to follow sometimes. I appreciate that. Mr. Traxel, thank you for your presentation. Just to clarify for council that the critical services of fire and police, of course, is provided to your group. I'm sure you agree with that, but your concern really revolves around more of the maintenance type issues that a single family dwelling across the street or across the cul-de-sac in the area would get that you're not getting as part of your bare land condo. Just so we got a clarification, that's the concern, more of an equity thing is the concern of your group. Is that correct?
Exactly. For our residents, if they're sitting in their front room looking out across to the front street, they don't see a street that the city is going to clear or going to maintain or anything like that. Anything that happens on that street, if there's a sewer backup or a tree that dies or anything in that neighborhood, we look after that ourselves, and we pay it out of our own condo fees and our own reserve fund. The city is never brought in to do any of that work.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you. I'm done.
If you're in Chalarousse in a residential area, if you see a crack in your sidewalk, you're going to call the town and say, I have a crack in my sidewalk. Can you come and change, break up my sidewalk and repair it for me, please?
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Seeing no further requests to talk. Once again, thank you for coming in tonight and bringing this matter to our attention, and we will we'll take it under advisement and get some more information as we go forward and see what we can do. Do appreciate it.
We're more than happy to work with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so at this point, I'm going for an hour and a half, so we'll take a 10-minute break. So back at or an 8-minute break. So back at 7:40, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call back to order the regular council meeting of November the 24th. We got some weird feedback happening. Somebody's doing something. All right, so brings us to business item 8A, notice of motion, Councillor Daniluk. So as is traditional, we will allow Ms. Winter to introduce it, and then the floor is Councillor Daniluk's.
Thank you, Worship. This one actually, Ms. Darje will be introducing and speaking to.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. I'm sorry, I just want to make note that my camera is off to the side of my monitor, so I apologize for the side profile. On August 25th, thank you. On August 25th, Council passed a motion directing administration to conduct a traffic assessment on the intersection of Township Road 510 and Range Road 243. Concerns had been raised regarding delays, traffic queues for left turning traffic, and general safety for the intersection. Design work for Township 510 is currently underway as part of the 2020 budget year. As a part of this design work, a traffic assessment will be completed for the entirety of the Township 510 corridor. However, to address Council's notice of motion, a traffic assessment and site visits of the intersection were conducted to identify any operational or safety concerns that would warrant interim solutions prior to the ultimate design and construction schedule of Township 510. Currently, the intersection has a stop sign for northbound traffic with a separate left turn lane and right turn bay. Single lanes exist for both east and westbound traffic along the 510. Background traffic volume, projected new development traffic volume, and total volume traffic information was validated through a site visit conducted during the peak period. During the site visit count, it was observed that the intersection operated acceptably. There were a few occasions where queuing was observed, but these were isolated incidents, and the intersection still performed acceptably and in accordance with industry standards. A scenario for a three-way stop was also reviewed, and it was determined that this was not a feasible solution, as it would end up creating significant delays and traffic queues in excess of 500 meters. This option is not recommended. Overall, the traffic assessment for the intersection is currently operating at an acceptable level of service, which is classified as a level of service A. Industry standard typically looks to make intersection improvements when the level of service reaches a level of service C or D, where traffic flow approaches unstable flow. Based on the information collected and observed, intersection improvements are not warranted at this time. When intersection improvements are warranted, it is recommended that they include the following so that the intersection continues to function properly: the installation of a westbound left turn bay, installation of an eastbound right turn bay, and the signalization of the intersection. Administration presents this report to council for your information. That does conclude my presentation on this, but I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Thank you, Ms. Dargy, for your presentation and information that was verbally well received by myself in terms of additional information. So as council is aware, I had to just raise the concern this past summer of seeing 2 or 3 incidents where there was a near accident where a person who was going to be turning left from 243 going onto 510 going west away from Beaumont were getting a little bit impatient, I think, and trying to jump the queue and trying to get in left turn made. And I've seen a couple of cars almost going to the ditch to avoid a collision. And my thoughts are simply that in my role as a councillor and the role of you all as councillors is the safety of our citizens as a primary concern. So I raised the question about some kind of traffic control at the intersection. I made it very clear back in the summer, and fully endorse it now, that I know we have a plan for 510 going forward, and it's outlined in this report today. I don't want to spend a bunch of money on an intersection and have to tear it apart a year or 2 down the road. It would not make sense of using tax dollars. At the same time, how do we balance tax dollars with safety of our citizens? So the assessment provided now does help to address my concern and the concern of council in general of our safety of our citizens at that particular intersection. I know since the Spine Road opened west of Beaumont a while ago, traffic flow into Beaumont on the 510 coming in has increased dramatically. But Ms. Dargy did provide more information than what I would see written here as to how the assessment was done to determine if the recommendation, if the option is not recommended, being the 3-way stop. Your verbal presentation gave more information to me about how the assessment was done, how recently it was done as well too. So I'm feeling more comfortable with the recommendation of having not a 3-way stop at the intersection based on the presentation information here and your verbal description, Ms. Dargy, about the how the assessment was done. So if I may ask a question at this point, you mentioned we're at level A, and level C or D is how the assessment determines, I'm assuming based on Alberta transportation rules and guidelines, as to when a 3-way stop might be warranted. Is that a fair way to assess your comments?
Thank you, Councillor Daniluk, Councillor Daniluk. So right now, the intersection functions at the level of service A, which is the highest level of standard, and then basically it's in short term free flow. These levels of service work very much like an elementary report card. A is really good, F is fail. So if we're looking at a level of service A, that doesn't indicate that there should be any intersection improvements warranted. Typically, industry standard looks at a level C or D when intersection improvements are required. The City of Beaumont historically has looked to a level of service D as to when it makes its intersection improvements. Based on the information that we have on traffic impact assessments from surrounding development, proposed development, the design volume that we expect, as well as the current volume, we don't anticipate that there should be any traffic or intersection improvements needed in the next 5 years. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it basically does, yes. So level A is essentially now the traffic flow is flowing properly within accepted safety standards. And as it gets busier and busier, it goes down to B, C, and D. And approximately C and D is where we look at saying, okay, traffic flow has increased or safety factors have increased enough. Now we need to look at a 3-way stop or some kind of control at the intersection. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Danlick. Sorry, I didn't address your three-way stop question. I apologize. So when they actualized a three-way stop, so basically they looked at how would a three-way stop function on this intersection, it actually failed immediately because it caused queues of longer than 500 meters. So a three-way stop is not a recommended solution at any point in time. In order to ensure that the intersection operates properly at a level D or above, the recommendation is the installation of the westbound left turn bay, the installation of the eastbound right turn bay, and signalization of the intersection. So all three of those need to be done at the same time once that intersection gets to a level of service D. So the three-way traffic is not a recommended solution at any point in time.
Thank you, Mrs. Darjay. Mayor Stewart, I'll yield the floor now to other councillors. I may come back with a follow-up question at the end, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, just one item, it should be noted for council considerations, we do have a project that's coming as perhaps part of budget discussions, or perhaps not, to make those improvements early. But for me, it's going to, so I don't want to get into a budget discussion tonight, but we do have that project that's part of our budget package sitting in front of us for discussion should it be warranted.
That's correct.
Open it
That's
up to
thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, thank you. To the men on the 243 intersection right at 510 and you're westbound on the left-hand lane, you're staged one car length back from the stop sign line. The sight lines to the west then are impeded through the tree farm. Just wondered if a sightline study had been done just to see if, and again, it depends on the time of year. The foliage during the summer is in full bloom, and you really can't see anything coming from the west heading east. And then, of course, in the winter with the trees dropping their leaves, you get a better sight line. But has there been a sightline study done for that intersection?
As part of this traffic assessment, I'm not aware of any sightline assessment that was done. We can go back to our consultant and have them take a look at that. But I believe as part of developing the intersection that Cheyenne Tree Farms is set back far enough from the intersection so that the immediate traffic that's at the stop sign isn't impeded by any sight lines. I mean, essentially the first vehicle that's at the stop sign shouldn't have any sight line improvement. If you're one vehicle back, you still are required to stop at the stop sign.
No. So, okay, if I can, so you're traveling northbound, you're in that left turn lane, you're wanting to turn west. There's a big hash mark on the asphalt telling you that you can't go into that area of the asphalt because anybody that's westbound turning southbound can't make the turn. So that holds you back, which is fine. But I'm just saying, when you sit there and you're looking to the left, which is west, and you're trying to see if anything's coming at you from the west, and you're still sitting where you're supposed to be sitting, you're looking through the trees. So that would be the concern. So when Councillor Danlick raised this, I sort of concurred with him. I said, look, at least from a sightline perspective, I think there's a problem. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hendricks, Your Worship. If I could get that information back from the consultant, I can bring it forward at the budget discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stowe.
Thank you, Worship. Just concur with Councillor Hendricks there. I've made the turn he describes many times, and yes, when the trees are in full bloom, the sightlines are very definitely obstructed, basically forcing me to creep forward through the hash marks so that before I can actually commit to the turn, which is dangerous, basically. What I was going to ask is, I noticed that signalization is indicated in the long term when this intersection reaches category C of traffic flow. Is that traffic light? Does that mean traffic lights?
Councillor Stout, through Your Worship. Yes, that is what that means.
Okay, was any is there any opportunity, any consideration given to an alternative of a traffic circle or some other non-traffic light traffic control device? I'm thinking roundabout traffic circle, and if council wanted to consider that, where in the process would we raise that as a request or an inquiry?
That's more of a discussion for budget if we're going to discuss that project as to what type should go there. And right now we're down into the weeds of engineering a solution. So I don't know where to go from there, but I think part of that's got to come back with the whole 510 design, not necessarily held in isolation with just this intersection. But realistically, this is more of a conversation for budget. Are we okay with moving this conversation to budget when we have more time?
Yes, I'm happy to move it to budget if I just wanted to make sure that I could actually do that.
Councillor Daniluk, follow up.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I do appreciate Ms. Dargy's explanation of the levels of traffic and assessment. That was very helpful to understand that currently the situation that the intersection is considered safe. However, the sightline idea of Mr. Councillor Hendricks has me intrigued. So I'd like to suggest the following. I'd be prepared to move to accept this report as information, but would you require a second motion to ask that the sightline assessment be brought back to council at a later time? Or what's the best way to do this without getting too deep into the weeds?
Administration's already said that they would bring it to budget.
Okay, budget itself. Okay, and okay. Then if you're okay with that, Mayor Stewart, I'll make the motion to accept the report as information, please.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Motion on the floor. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no further hands, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. So thank you very much. Look forward to discussing this project should a member of council wish to move it. And we'll go from there. Thanks for Ms. Dargy for coming in tonight and presenting the information.
Thank you.
Which brings us to item 8B, financial quarterly report. Mr. Dollar.
Thank you through your worship and the rest of council and the public. Name's Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the Director of Finance, and I'll be presenting the quarterly financial report for the third quarter of the 2020 budget year. As noted, this report is intended to provide a status update on the budget and provide forecasts to year end. First off, I'll draw your attention to attachment 1, which is page 41 of the budget, or the agenda package rather. So this attachment shows actuals to September 30th, 2020 compared with the operating budget, as well as a forecast at the end of the year. At the time of the second quarter report, which was presented to council in July, admin was forecasting a $611,000 deficit due to decreased expected revenues resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Since that time, administration has sought to reduce this deficit through offsetting reductions to expenses. The government in Alberta and the government in Canada announced funding to support municipalities through the municipal operating support transfer. This recognizes municipalities have experienced significant operating impacts due to COVID-19. Funding will be used for incremental operating costs incurred, as well as operating losses or deficits incurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The City of Beaumont's been allocated $1.9 million through this program, and the funds must be expended by March 31st, 2021. So 75% of this grant has been reflected in the corporate revenue in attachment 1. In absence of this grant, the city would be forecasting approximately a $400,000 deficit, which is a $211,000 reduction to be exact from the Q2 forecast. Factoring in the grant just explained, the forecast has changed to a surplus of approximately $1 million for the operating budget. Next, on the utility budget, I'll draw your attention to attachment 2, which is page 43 of the agenda package. Utility revenue is forecast to be approximately $437,000 less than what was budgeted, largely driven by a lack of offsite levy receipts in the year. The 2020 solid waste budget includes costs for a new solid waste contract. This contract was not executed until September 2020, therefore a savings of approximately $400,000 was realized. Factoring in the decreased revenue and the decreased expenses, this results in a projected surplus of $373,000, which equates to approximately 3.7 of the utility budget. Next, reserves, which is new compared to the second quarter report. It's anticipated that the operating budget will require reserve draws of $5.1 million, which is $1 million less than what the budget amount of 6.1. This decrease is driven from not requiring phase-in or contingency funds that will likely not be required in areas such as transit. As well as a result of the municipal stimulus, municipal operating support transfer, it's unlikely that the $250,000 allocated by council in the spring will be required to offset COVID-related costs. From a capital reserve perspective, $4.6 million of a budgeted $5.3 million is forecast to be required to fund capital projects. Financial impact of surpluses or deficits in the city's budget will result in either transfers or draws from their respective reserves. Should the city realize a deficit in its operating budget, a year-end draw from reserve would be required, most likely from the financial stabilization reserve. Correspondingly, a reserve transfer draw would be made for the utility budget with its respective reserve. Thank you. I'm willing to answer any questions council may have.
Appreciate that. I will move that we accept the report for information, and I will open it up to questions from members of council. Seems to be fairly straightforward and a good news budget. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate the explanation. One quick question, please. In the attachment 1, you mentioned 1.95 million is their allocation of the COVID relief package from the provincial government, and 75% of 1.4 million is in the attachment 1 under the category of, hang on one second, I had a minute here. Where did it go there? Hang on a second. Capital corporate revenue, is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Daniluk, yes, that's correct. 1.4 million has been recognized of that grant, which is 75% of the 1.95.
Right. The other 25% is being held where? Is it in one of these attachments? I couldn't see where the other 25% is being allocated at this time. Is it, or yet to be allocated, is my understanding?
It would be yet to be allocated, as the funds are required to be expended before March 31st of 2021. We allocated 9 months worth of the grant that was received for 2020. So
we have approximately $450,000 yet to be allocated from that provincial grant.
That's correct.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Councillor Mungat-Swain.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe a process question here, and then followed up with a more specific question on the agenda item. So I see on page 40, it says capital attachment 4 closed session pursuant to section 24(1)(a) and G. So I don't see that unless I'm looking at an old agenda, but I don't see anything in the closed session. So
that information will come when we get to the closed session portion of the meeting down at item, I think it's 14.
No, I understand that. I guess my point is I didn't see anything on the agenda saying that we did have a closed session. So just confirming that we do have a closed session to speak to that.
Yep, we have a closed session to speak to that.
Okay, and again, I may have missed when we were setting the agenda. I thought we had to speak to, we had to amend that. But anyway, that's beside the point. So thanks for clarifying that. And so we'll, I'm not sure why we're in closed session on those items, but I respect the fact that we are. I won't challenge that here. My question is, going forward, when we get these quarterly updates, I would imagine this would be something that I would like to see just on the capital projects that we have spent. Is this something that is always going to stay in closed session, or is this something that we can add on a quarterly basis to get an update? We've got a very good detailed on operating and utility, etc. I figure we could or should have it on where we're at with from a capital spend from the budget.
We'll go over it when we get to the closed session portion, but there's some very good reasons why this is being done in closed session tonight, and will address this item for you then. CO?
Yeah, to answer your question, Councillor Monkhouse-Swain, this is an anomaly. This is not how we intend to present this. We're going in camera to be able to provide some advice to elected officials regarding potential legal matters.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is going forward, if we didn't have this anomaly, it would be part of the quarterly update that we'll see from Curtis.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to clarify. I appreciate that, and like I said, I won't get into why we're going into budget into in camera. Just looking forward to seeing that down the road, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. The information is welcome, I would say. The quarterly financial report, with the attached documents and such. I wonder if we might not be able to find a easier to follow way to present this information. I don't know what that is. When I think of something that might be easier to follow, I think of our, the regional briefings that we get and the format of that or something else. I just found this document hard to follow with the small tables kind of page after page and trying to equate the numbers from one table to the next and remember that. Anyways, I don't know, Mr. DeBlanco, how a person might do that, but just a suggestion that it, and some feedback that I did find it a little bit hard to follow. It's not that the information's hard. It's just I found myself flipping back and forth a few times to make it all connect. So just a comment.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further requests to speak, we will call the question. Can I just get the hands cleared from the last vote, or the check marks cleared from the last vote? Thank you. All those in favor? That's 7. That carries unanimously. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. DeBlanco. We'll see you again at item 14, I'm sure. Brings us to item 8C, December council meeting schedule. Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council and the public. In the past, council meetings in December have been canceled to accommodate for elected officials and administration's absences during the holidays. If meetings are canceled there and there is any business that needs to be addressed, a special council meeting could be called pursuant to the provisions of the Municipal Government Act. Tonight, administration supports the proposed cancellation schedule and is asking council to support that December 22nd, 2020 regular council meeting be canceled and to direct administration to conduct the necessary advertising to the public regarding the cancellation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there a member of council willing to move the motion? Councillor Barnhart. Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion. Oh, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out that, this year has been extraordinary, and the extraordinary circumstances of this year have had the mayor have to call many, special meetings. And, just to point out that just because we're eliminating a meeting does not preclude the fact that the mayor can call a special meeting at any time, like he's been doing a lot lately. And, because we have stuff to do. So just want to point that out to folks as we're eliminating a meeting that, at any time the mayor sends an email and we're back together. So thank you.
Appreciate the point, Councillor Van Newkirk. Seeing no further requests, all in favor? One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7. That carries unanimously. Appreciate that. Brings us to item 9A, bylaw 991-20, land use bylaw amendment, election sign regulations, first reading. Mr. Rates.
Good evening, Council. Administration has prepared one presentation for both of these items, so we'll be running through the presentation and then be able to tackle both items over the next little bit. So I'm just sharing my screen and going to full screen, hoping that's been captured and we're good to go. And so, sorry, I'm just going to go back a slide. So tonight's presentation focuses on both the proposed amendments that are being brought forward for the land use bylaw as well as the traffic safety bylaw. And then also tonight acts as an opportunity to review the council policy on election signage. That would be part of the framework or approach that administration has recommended we move forward with to regulate election signage during election periods. And so just as a brief review, on August 25th, 2020, council provided administration with direction to produce a report regarding election sign regulations within the land use bylaw and any other enforcement mechanisms. And this was brought forward on October 13th, 2020. And at that meeting, council provided direction for administration to move forward with the recommended changes that were posited within that report. And so that is what today's meeting is about, covering these 3 items and focusing moving forward on the amendments for these 2 items. And so just to remind ourselves of what has been sort of the foundation for this entire process is that administration is trying to work on concerns that were raised in the community regarding safety, regarding the standardization or providing a clear process for election signs, and then also limiting aesthetic impacts that may exist or may come about due to crowding of election signs during election periods, as it marks a departure from what members of the community are used to seeing within the city limits. And so just to talk about the arc of implementation that we're working on right now, we've developed that set of amendments to be brought forward for contemplation and voting today. And out of those amendments, the bylaw speaks of a guidelines or policy that is pointed towards. And so we provided the draft for review today. And so if all these items are moved forward by administration, then by council, administration will be prepared to facilitate and regulate election signs in the lead up to the 2021 municipal election period. And so we'll take a step back now and talk about the rationale behind administration's recommendation in this case, as it is a little bit complicated in how the amendments are presented and how the regulations are actually spelled out. But this is thinking of what we want the user experience to be at the end of the day and where folks can go to understand how election signs are regulated. And so administration identified the approach that was used by the city of Edmonton, that election sign requirements can be communicated within one policy and not within separate policies as we would have before. This is because right now, the land use bylaw would act as the primary mechanism that's used to regulate election signs. However, the land use bylaw is primarily focused on development on private property. And so to regulate election signs that also are placed on public property is sort of outside the focus of this bylaw. And so we presented amendments to the traffic safety bylaw, where the traffic safety bylaw's focus is on the space along road right-of-ways and public property in those areas. And so we provide amendments to both of these documents to speak to one policy so that this policy can be the one go-to place for members of the community to look to and understand what requirements are throughout the community instead of pointing to separate places and kind of creating a divergence in where we're directing people to. Also going forward, extracting the regulatory or sort of standards from the bylaws themselves allows for an easier amendment process going forward, instead of having these regulations within 2 separate bylaws that have separate amendment processes. Including these within a council policy will be simpler to amend in the future and allow administration to be more nimble to any upcoming or ongoing concerns that we may identify within the community. And so this is where the city of Beaumont's approach would divert somewhat from the city of Edmonton's, which was identified within the jurisdictional scan, the most achievable within the timelines that we had set for ourselves in creating these new regulations. The city of Edmonton has a administrative policy. However, the city of Beaumont has brought forward a council policy as we're marking a departure on how we would regulate these things. And we understand in the conversations leading up to this point that council would like to have a role in how these are defined and outlined for the community. And so just to summarize this rationale piece, this approach would address the concerns related to election signage, regarding safety, standardization of process, and aesthetic impacts in a way that reduces red tape, ensuring that any future amendments can be completed in a much more timely manner, and also simplifies the requirements for the public in that they only have to look to one place to understand what the requirements are. So now we'll spell out what the envisioned process would be. And so we have tonight's council meeting where the land use bylaws would go forward for potential first reading. And then on December 8th, 2020, it would go forward for potentially go forward for public hearing in second and third reading as per requirements of the Municipal Government Act. And then the traffic safety bylaw has the capacity to go forward for first, second, and third reading today if council moves in this direction, or it can go forward for first reading and can be brought back on the 8th. And then the council policy, which again holds the regulations or the specific standards. Council has the opportunity to review this tonight, and then a finalized version of this policy would be brought forward on the 8th for approval by resolution. And this timeline is being used to meet the direction that council had provided in that we were hoping to finalize these requirements or regulations by January 1st, 2021. And so the land use bylaw amendments, just to briefly cover these, we changed the following factors and also made changes within the traffic safety bylaw. And so these changes together provide parallel direction, but because the bylaws were in separate places prior to moving to this spot, they required different amendments. And so the land use bylaw amendments focus on providing the same election sign definition to provide consistency, and then removing the current requirements that are placed within the bylaw regarding size, timelines, and placement. Then this is placed within the policy. And again, this is due to the land use bylaws focus on regulating private development and not necessarily activities, or not focusing on activities within public property. And then of course, providing the parallel direction to the council policy as the traffic safety bylaw would do. And now into the traffic safety bylaw amendments. Currently, there was not direction for regulating election signs within the traffic safety bylaw. So this is mostly additions to the traffic safety bylaw. We provide the same definition of election signage. We add direction towards this council policy. And then one distinction here, or two distinctions, is that the traffic safety bylaw amendments would clarify who is responsible for placement. And this is something that is already covered within the land use bylaw, and that it is the anticipation or expectation that the responsibility of development falls to the owner of that property on which the development occurs. And with the traffic safety bylaw, we needed to be more specific in who would be responsible, and it would ultimately, or is defined within the amendment as the candidate who is placing these signs. That is ultimately where the responsibility would lie. And this second piece, adding a fine for non-compliance to ensure that there's an enforcement mechanism. And again, this is a departure from how the land use bylaw amendments work, because the land use bylaw already has a regulation that sets out what fines would be for non-compliance and how this would work. So it's a little bit complicated on the back end, but it provides a much more user-friendly experience on the front end, because then we can just all be looking at one council policy that would outline how election signs work during election periods. And so this draft policy defines election signs in a similar manner to the bylaws, and then provides guidelines for the design, the timelines, and the placement of these signs. And so just to run through the proposed changes as were recommended within the previous report, the timelines for, and so these changes kind of reflect what the current status is, where the land use bylaw is where the current standards are. And so we take those out and put them in the policy. And in taking them out and putting them in the policy, we altered some of the standards that were previously set within land use bylaw and added to these standards to reflect the concerns that we were hearing from the community and the direction of council. And so just to dive into these, the timelines for removal were altered from 48 to 72 hours to align with other jurisdictions in the region. Placement requirements have been set to prohibit signage in specific location where safety and visual clutter could be a concern. And then distance requirements using either 15 meters or 1.5 meters to provide some consistency and an easy explanation of equating 15 meters to X amount of paces or 1.5 meters to X amount of paces. Providing these separation distances between certain features or signs of one candidate just to meet the concerns around safety, visual clutter, and providing a clear process across the board. And so as I outlined previously, we are able to bring forward the finalized version of the council policy, as well as the public hearing and second and third reading on the land use bylaw amendments at the December 8th council meeting, as well as any additional required readings of the traffic safety bylaw dependent on what council provides direction for and moves on tonight. And then after that meeting, if council approves the council policy as well as all of the amendments described, moving into January, administration can move forward with communicating changes to election signs with nominated candidates, and in the lead up to the election, administration can communicate the requirements with the public as well. And to take a step back, on the December 8th council meeting, it's the intention of administration to provide for review some of the supplementary materials that would support the explanation of the policy, like figures, maps, graphics, just for review and to explain how these things will be communicated going forward. So just wanted to outline that information will be forthcoming. And so that will end the presentation that administration is sharing tonight. And so we are able to answer any questions or take in feedback regarding this from council now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because you combined the two items together, we will take questions first on the overall presentation, and then we will move into motions to get through whatever readings we can get through tonight. So we'll open it up to questions from members of council. Councilor McGough-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. First up, Mr. Wrights, great job explaining three very complicated things and meshing them all together. You did a good job. I was a little bit confused as to, I recognize that you said the council policy we're going to talk about on December 8th. I get that. I was a little confused about why it was included in this package. I see it's kind of more for information. The motions that are going to be coming up are to provide first reading to those two bylaws specifically. So I guess in my mind, I'm just clarifying, making sure right now, we've had the discussion and I'm on the wrong side of the vote, and that's okay. So I don't support the council policy. We'll get into that on the 8th. So in my own mind, I'm still voting for the first reading because that's to remove it and basically pull out that information from those two bylaws into a council policy. And then when we get to December 8th, then we'll go through that council policy. Am I interpreting that the right way?
Yes, so through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, the draft council policy was provided tonight to just keep council up to date on how that end of the file was moving forward, and just make sure that the amendments presented weren't super nebulous and that we wouldn't understand what they were pointing towards. But yes, that is how the process would be working, and that the amendments would occur tonight for the bylaws pending council's direction, and then the council policy would come forward, a finalized version of this for discussion and potential approval by resolution.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it for me. A little bit weird for me to vote on a bylaw without that refers to a policy that that we haven't finalized. But I get what you're trying to do to use the right word, nebulous, there, so that we could actually kind of see where it was going. We've had this discussion in detail, so I figured that's where it'd be landing. So yeah, I appreciate you clarifying how that all meshed together. So thanks for that. I'm good there, John.
Thank you, Councillor Stout.
Oh, I better unmute myself. Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Rates. Could I just, and thank you again. Yes, I'll concur with Councillor Munkoff-Swain. Thank you for guiding us through that complex interchange of different things. Appreciate that. Good exposition. And certainly helps me understand it. I'd like a clarification though on something else. In the policy, there's a point, number 14. I'm just going to see if I can find it in the document, where I had to read that 2 or 3 times before I understood what the sentence meant, and I'm not sure that I do now. So we're on page 58 of 99 in the agenda package. The placement of election signs on public property not along roadways shall meet the following requirements. Signs shall not be placed on public property not along public roadways. I'm always confused when I see 2 nots in a sentence, but that's possibly from my career writing computer code, because that can lead to some very strange situations. Is it so? I just wanted to get to the bottom of this. What is the intent of that regulation? Is the intent to prevent candidates putting election signs up around, let's say, the spray park? Is that what we're driving at? So we're saying that you can't put it on public property if the public property isn't alongside a roadway.
Mm-hmm. So through your worship to Councillor Stout, administration kind of realized that there may be scenarios that wouldn't be captured under everything that was listed in the policy so far. And so the addition of point 14 was to hopefully kind of catch all or capture those sort of areas that we hadn't, that didn't have any regulation focused on them in the previous version of the draft policy. And so that is the intent of that statement, is to capture areas that may be covered under the traffic safety bylaw, but would not be spoken to in the regulations already spelled out. And so, administration recognizes that that may not be that is not the clearest statement for most readers. And so this would be something that we would be providing supplementary materials to explain each of these points. And number 14 is definitely something that we can better explain pictorially or graphically than we can by just reading out the regulation.
Okay, thank you. So I am correct. This is to prevent candidates filling a public park with election signs. Is that so?
That, through your worship to Councillor Stout, that would be the intent.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yeah, I just suggest that we maybe need to reword 14 for greater clarity. And yeah, if you can support it with some, however you support it with graphics or diagrams, it's still going to need to be worded in an ambiguous but easy to understand manner, I think, because somebody's going to read it and put their own interpretation on it if there is any ambiguity of it. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further requests to speak, we will get underway. Is there a member of council willing to move first reading of bylaw 991-20, land use bylaw amendment, election sign regulations? Councillor Stout.
So moved, your worship.
Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Seven, that carries unanimously. Very good. I'm just moving down to the next meeting agenda item point. Is there a member of council willing to give first reading to bylaw 992-20 to amend the traffic safety bylaw 834-14 to update the regulations regarding election signs as presented in attachment 1? Councillor Daniluk.
So moved, your worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Is there a member of council willing to move second reading of bylaw 992-20? Seeing none. Councillor Daniluk.
So moved, your worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? One, two, three, four, five, 7. That carries unanimously. Move the council give unanimous consent to moving to third reading of bylaw 992-20. All in favor?
No discussion.
We can have discussion if you need it, but if you just vote no, we just move to third reading and move on with life. But if we want to discuss it, sure. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All right, so you need to call the question.
Oh, hang on.
No, hang on. Councilor Hendricks.
Your worship, just walk us through process here at this point.
If we don't get unanimous consent, third reading moves to the next council meeting.
And yeah, so my question to you then is, why are we going to third?
It's because we've discussed this at length in the past, and just wanting to see if council has appetite to finish this bylaw up tonight or move it to the next council meeting.
Okay, so, and in the public?
This particular bylaw doesn't require a public hearing or other items attached to it. So
No,
the
but
land use bylaw requires a public hearing.
No, I appreciate that. All I'm getting at is that this then gets on the table for at least one round. That allows those who are interested in participating in this conversation to get back to us. This thing's now on the table. Unless there's some scheduling issue, why wouldn't we wait till the next meeting?
No, there's no scheduling issue. I just, for me, it was a straightforward item and reflecting what we wanted to do. And there's other opportunities for the public to weigh in on the land use bylaw amendment and the draft policy.
Yeah.
For me, the changes in the election sign amendment were kind of in the regulations. In this particular bylaw, we're very minor in nature. So
yeah.
But if you wish to not move to third reading, I'm fine with that. I really am. It's fine with me. We just call the question.
Okay, let's call the question.
Okay, hang on. What are we voting on here?
Unanimous consent to go to third.
Third reading. So all in favor? Oh, and that fails 4-3. So third reading will move to December the 8th. The draft council policy goes back in the 8th, which brings us to item 10, councilors' inquiries and reports. We'll start out with councilor inquiries, moving to reports. Do members of council have a question for administration this evening? Councilor Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I think all councillors got this email earlier today. So I'm just curious about an update on the outdoor rink at 56A Street. We apparently made a decision not to flood it this year due to the incoming other outdoor rink just across the field there. Could administration provide an update on that or the decision behind that, please?
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. And I see that Jennifer's on the Zoom link as well. So if I screw this up, she can tell you what really went on. So our plan was to indeed that not to flood the grass area of 56A as we believe Dansville will be ready. That seems to be coming together as we planned. The concrete's in its last week of curing. The lights are going to be scheduled to be installed by the end of November, with the boards coming the next week. We're looking at the weather right now. We're not flooding anything because it's too warm. And the forecast is too warm for the next 2 weeks. So our ice operations have effectively come to a standstill until we get that weather. So we believe that the warmer weather and the construction schedule are going to line up nicely, and that we'll be good to go. So if that doesn't occur, we have a construction delay, then yes, we'll get out and we'll do the grass rink. But we're hoping that everything lines up, and we're confident that we'll be able to have the new one up and running. But regardless, we will have ice up and running when the weather hits cold, which we believe will be the second week of December. Jennifer, anything you need to add to that? Putting you on the spot. Unless that answers your question, Councillor Monkhouse.
I got a follow up, but I'll let Ms. Bozo Hudak follow up if she had anything to add.
No, there's nothing else to add right now, but it was, and unfortunately I can't get my bandwidth, so I can't get my video. But the ice that we would do is, and was always intended to not, once Dansville was up, that grass area would then become a natural area where we'd put some trees and some picnic tables and make it a little inviting area. It's not large enough to do any kind of sports field there, but we were going to convert that to that kind of a space, a park space.
Okay, so a couple of follow-up questions, if you don't mind, Your Worship.
Sure.
So without putting you on the spot, but that's exactly what I'm doing. The operational cost or impact of flooding that, and the reason why I asked that question is, yes, great if we can get that other one up in time, but particularly with everything going on, we're trying to push social distancing. I think we're, the more opportunities, places for people to get out there and in the outdoors, the better. So I was surprised by the decision. I guess I would say, there, at the new rink, if there's a game of shinny going on, that this other one would provide an opportunity for folks to get out there and practice skating or do whatever they wanted on that one. So was it an operation? Was it a dollars question? Or I think there would be, maybe if I put it this way, I think there'd be more value to the community than a few trees and tables to flood that rink in the winter. But I'll pause there for any response.
With the second phase of that rink, there will be a area that will have just general skating. So if it's a matter of providing an extra area during this pandemic time, that's something that we'll have to reallocate some resources to. Right now, with the budget that we're coming through for deliberation, there's some things that have shown that we required a few more parks operators, and that's one of the issues as well. It's just adding that extra resource to that to be able to handle both. But we'll manage what we have to if that's what council so wishes. But with that new design at Dansville, we do have that second pad that would accommodate the issue with people playing shinny and being able to just skate.
Okay, I think I got the answers I'm looking for tonight, and we'll discuss this at budget with the operational impact. So I appreciate you guys getting that response so quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. A couple of things. One is, of course, tonight the Premier had addressed the province on new restrictions, and just wanted to hear from admin if they've had a chance to digest some of it and whether or not it impacts us moving forward with our budget this week.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Hendricks, through the chair. Yeah, as you know, the announcement came about 4:45 this afternoon. I've been on the side here as well as a couple other staff trying to dissect the information. It's really quite incomplete, to say the least, and a little bit confusing. Was on the phone a couple times tonight with the ZOC, the Zone Operations, Emergency Operations Center, to try and get some clarification on some of this information, and also to register a not too warm complaint about why we didn't get a heads up. The information, as I was explained, is that the politicians at the met, I believe, for 8 hours today, and the decisions were made so late in the day that they weren't able to give us any more detail or any heads up information. So right now, the city's evaluating the restrictions, determine how its programs and services will be affected. Areas that jump out at me right now that need to be considered from what I know, and this could change by tomorrow and we will know tomorrow, is quite likely the BSRC is something we may want to look at it from an operational impact. There's some confusion on whether the community center can stay open or not. So we've got guest services folks looking at that this evening, but we'll have a more detailed roll up for you tomorrow. Those are two areas that leap out at me that may impact what we're doing right now. For the most part, Beaumont has been ahead. I'm glancing off to the side here. No, I'm not looking at the camera because I'm looking at the measures. For the most part, most of those things are in place. Of course, the school things are a little different, but that's out of our jurisdiction. So yeah, the BSRC operations and the community center are two things, and Ken Nickel, sorry, are three things that leap out at me, and we'll just have to go through the information.
Right. So one of the things that Mr. Kenny offered today was timeline. So he said they're going to reevaluate in 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks, they don't have what they need out of this set of restrictions. They're really going to tighten it up. So my question to you is just on the advice. We're about to go through quite a budget process. We'll be making a lot of decisions. I'd hate to have to revisit all of this in February and do it yet again. So how comfortable do you feel us moving forward this week?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Mike Dowler and I have been having that conversation through the chat this evening, and Mike, please weigh in. Without having a crystal ball, it's difficult to determine what the province is going to do. You know, if they shut everything down and our rec facilities now down for the next 6 months, we're not going to know that right now. As far as granting, and the Premier has made a lot of hints that we're going to see those things dry up. You know, and Mike Dowler, please correct me if I'm wrong. From my perspective, I don't know that it makes a big difference whether we proceed or whether we delay. And certainly a great question. And I'm going to let the expert weigh in here. But from the information that I'm seeing so far, we can do it either way. Mr. Dowler?
Thanks, Mike. The only thing that I would add would be just a reminder to council that really when it comes to a budget, we're really focused on ongoing costs. So if there's some thought that because of the pandemic that we would want to reduce our revenues and our expenditures, but not eliminate services, then I would suggest it doesn't impact us at all. Because what that would eventually do is you could go through that process this year in reaction to a pandemic, and possibly reduce the amount of property tax that you require in 21. However, if there's a feeling that those services are going to come back and we want to continue those services into the future once we're through the worst part of this pandemic, then there's going to be a required tax increase down the road. So you would really be encumbering the future council to have to raise taxes to bring those services back up to speed. So that's where, from my perspective, the pandemic, and we've tried to reiterate that a number of times through answering some of the questions that came forward from council, that the pandemic really does not have a huge or any significant impact when it comes to a budget that we're looking at going through in the next few days.
And if I could supplement that with a question. Tomorrow night, I'm on a CEC Zoom meeting starting at 7 o'clock, and that's the Community Events Committee. All the budgets for the upcoming events are going to be discussed. What's the advice that you could maybe hand off to Ms. Cuthbert and others before the meeting as to which events we should really focus on, which events we should just decide that that's beyond our reach at this time?
If I offered any advice, I would certainly be considering anything June and out. I wouldn't look at anything in the spring. I think June's probably pushing it. I would probably hesitate to plan anything really big right now. And that includes things like town and country days. And, you know, the information we're seeing is we could be 8 to 9 to a year away from a vaccine, which is really going to drive the lifting of these restrictions. That's right. The information you're getting is the same as mine. So I'm assuming you're making those same conclusions because you're not in your head.
Well, yeah, I'm saying, you know, as you know, the CEC went through quite a process, quite a roller coaster of conversation when this thing first hit. We had, at the time, the province was setting this pandemic up in phases. Phase 1, phase 2. If you hit to a phase 3, you'll have, you know, this sort of outcome. None of that has played out. Now we're getting this approach, and then we're going to get maybe another review in 3 weeks. So before we put all this humanity and energy into potential programming, which, you know, some of it starts right away. I mean, some of it's, you know, Christmas time stuff. You know, what are we doing? So I'd rather not be that guy in the room tomorrow on the Zoom call saying, I don't think we can pull this off because of what's going on with you know, the announcement today. I'd rather have it that our admin talks to Mrs. Cuthbert and others and say, listen, guys, you know, really the reality is here's the line in the sand, because they got the full rollout for the entire year up for conversation tomorrow.
You raise a good point. We'll provide some direction as best we can. I agree with you. The phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 didn't work. I look at the stats today, and they're talking about 80% of the cases are untraceable. This thing's not going anywhere in a hurry, but up. So it's going to get much worse before it gets better, I believe.
Right. And Trudeau, our Prime Minister, just, you know, yesterday tried to soften the idea that vaccine's going to roll out and we're going to have, you know, immunity here in short order. You know, he made sure, it sounded like it was several months of rollout before the first group that's assigned to getting vaccines will get it. So you're right. We're probably staring at the summer again before something happens for us. So, yeah.
Good catch.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Van Newkirk, question of administration.
Hey, that's just a quick question for administration. Just looking for an update on the new snow clearing. I think it's been going really well, and I look at it through the fact that we're not putting snow to the sides of the roads, and we're preventing drainage issues in the spring and all those good things. But operationally, just wondering how it's going. Have you received any feedback from residents that they're happy, mad, sad, glad? What does that look like right now from your lens? Thank you.
Jennifer, would you like to take that?
I will. What we've seen is actually 2 really good things. Our call volume is down drastically. The complaints or the issues that we're having right now were our initial startup. Unfortunately, our new team came on with the dump of snow, and that was their inaugural snow clearing event. And they did well. One of the things we've done this year by going, as you've indicated, we're timing things. We're finding that doing the windrow to the center of the road, we're having to manage the length of time that pile stays there, because one of the issues we don't want to have is we're trying to maintain the height so we don't have visual blockage or sightline issues at our pedestrian crossings. So this first kind of, I'm going to say 3 months for us is a lot of data collection so that we become much more streamlined. But as far as residents, we've had probably 3 or 4 that have provided us with some great guidance as they've been walking through. We haven't heard the same volume at all that we had last year. We have been tracking it using our online system, and we've had a better KPI this first month.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind providing an update, you know, every couple of meetings or something like that, just on that, just, you know, it's a service level change. And I know administration is, you know, like you said, you're figuring it out, right? It's a new tool, a new process, timing, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Seeing no further questions from members of council, is there Member of council wishing to make a statement tonight? Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, just very brief here. I just wanted to let council know that on Tuesday night, Councillor Daniluk was nominated and was successful at being vice chair for the Regional Water Commission. And so we have some good representation on there now. And so congrats to Bill with that appointment. Yeah, just looking forward to seeing his leadership through that Water Commission. That's a good spot for Beaumont to be represented at.
Thank you.
Awesome. Congratulations, Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you.
I do have a bit of an update, seeing no further requests to speak to members of council with the new measures that were announced by the province. Yeah, there are some, the conversations probably started on the weekend when we forecast these were coming. So there are some, just to keep you in the loop, there are some regional conversations going around between the mayors to see what other municipalities are doing so that we can perhaps take a coordinated approach. I know the CAOs are having the same chats. And so as the CAOs and our administration moves through the information, we will be coordinating with the region to see how it impacts everybody else. So just wanted to keep council in the loop in case you're wondering if we're talking to our regional neighbors to see what they're doing. Other than that, I don't have much. It's been busy at the EMRB. The correspondence package is going to have all the reports. I won't go through them tonight about IRTNP and the last round of consultation and the trends that came through for the ramp and things like that as we move forward. So if we have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, and we can go from there. Does members of council have questions for me tonight? Okay, seeing none, CAO's updates.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Covered a little bit through some of our discussions, and I know we've got another item to go. So I just got a couple things I wanted to remind folks. One is the budget workshops. They're running this Thursday and Friday from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. And then again on Saturday from 9 till 12. I believe it's 9 till 12. I'll double check the notices will be out there. You're correct. The CAOs meet every Friday morning at 7:30 to talk about regional approaches to COVID. And we're also on a weekly call with the ZEOC, the Zone Emergency Operations Center. So that's going to go tomorrow. So hope to have more certainty on some of these measures, and we'll keep you in the loop, definitely. Beaumont unfortunately hit 100 active cases today. That's not a milestone that we're proud of. Still holding at 7 deaths. There were 16 deaths in the province of Alberta today. So again, going back to regardless of the measures in the provinces, we just need to do our part. It's very simple. Mandatory mask across this province now is something that we've got to follow. It's not even just us getting it. And one of the conversations I had with one of the gentlemen in the operations center today, we talked about this whole folks that don't like the masking piece. The comment that they tossed back to him is really anecdotal is, well, then be very careful that you don't get injured or get into a vehicle accident or have any other illness that you need to be treated. Because when you go to the hospital, there's not going to be any room. So it's more of a case of protecting our healthcare system. So, and I know that's a controversial statement, but I'm an admin person, so I can make it. That's all I'm going to offer as far as an update, and we'll give more information as soon as I have it, likely tomorrow.
Appreciate that. There are no correspondence. Do members of council have a notice of motion they wish to make tonight? Okay, seeing none, I do have one notice of motion. It's stemming, we'll get into it next week. But I move that administration look into the number of property tax penalties being assessed for 2020, given the approval of the deferral program, to provide information on the effectiveness of those measures and if people and businesses are still in need of them, and to provide recommendations to extend or implement other measures, and to provide recommendations to ensure that the penalty process is aligned with the intent of the deferral program. We'll bring that to the next council meeting. I've had some conversations with residents surrounding penalties and stuff. So there's my notice of motion for tonight. I have submitted it to the city clerk already. Closed session. Can I get a motion to move into closed session to cover the capital program? Councillor Stokes.
I'll move that we go into closed session.
Discussion on the motion. All in favor?
Oops, sorry. No.
That carries unanimously. All right, so while we move into closed session, just a quick note to members of the public that are watching, we're still involved in an in-camera discussion, but procedurally, we can't extend our meeting past 10 o'clock unless council approves to do so. So therefore, I'd like at this point to make a motion to extend our meeting past 10 p.m. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. And looking to complete our agenda items this evening, I would ask for another motion to go into camera. Councillor Hendricks.
So moved.
Discussion on the motion? All in favor? That carries unanimously.